ships landed, whipped, chained, and branded. 300 years of free labor. We ain't asking for no favor. Time to pay. Right now, time for reparations. Right now, time for reparations. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, reparations. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, reparations.
Greetings, greetings, greetings. This is Brother Jumoke Ifetayo, the host of the Reparations Now podcast. And we're coming to you live. We're glad to be here today. We have this show is sponsored by Reparations United. We ask you to take a minute out to subscribe to our channel, like. We hope that you add comments throughout the show if you like. Today, I'm really excited. As a part of the Reparations Now podcast series, we've incorporated a particular element called Conversations with Our Elders. And these are people who have long-term reparations activists, long-term community activists, long-term freedom fighters in our movement. And so we wanted to make sure that we particularly capture their story. And so the first elder we did was Mama Efuya Wangaza. And today we have the honor and the privilege and the esteemed pleasure to have one of our titans, one of our giants in the reparations movement, one of our giants in the freedom fighting movement, Dr. Ron Daniels, also known as Professor Daniels. So we are glad to have him, and we will spend the next hour speaking with him around his contribution to the reparations movement. So, greetings, brother, Dr. Daniels. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I know I have a publicist now. I go ahead and hire you, and I can get out here and get some speaking engagements and blow up big time out here. So I appreciate the invitation, and certainly have I've seen you work for many, many, many years, and of course, also delighted to work with Kamm Howard with Reparations United. One of the truly great thought leaders in the reparations movement today.
Yes. And, we were talking off air, we have long history with each other. My father and Dr. Daniels have go back probably 50, 60 years in this movement. I remember the National Black Independent Political Party, and probably even before that was in the 80s. And so, and as well as we just recently found there's actually a family connection. My cousin and Dr. Daniels was at a family reunion and found out that we are connected as well as family connected. So it's a lot of connections there. But Ron Daniels, we just want you to share with us. I always ask people to kind of give us your own bio, like what is it that you feel like is important for people to know about you, and then how did you get connected to the reparations movement?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just talk about your father, because your father is really truly I don't want to say an unsung hero, because many of us in the movement know him. We presented him with the IBW Legacy Award several years ago, but I was just reflecting on the fact that these gaps in history that we need to fill, because the Welfare Rights Organization is an organization that almost nobody talks about now. And yet the Welfare Rights Organization that your father founded with a brother named George Wiley was an incredibly powerful organization of mothers, men as well, but mostly women on welfare, who organized themselves to be advocates for really the people who were marginalized, on welfare. And they were a powerful lobby, a powerful advocacy group. And I remember in Youngstown, Ohio, Odie Lee Ellis was the leader of the Welfare Rights Organization. I went to jail with her, protesting, benefits and access and respect, for people on welfare. And so I just want to uplift that, because today one wonders, you see Reverend Barber organizing around the Poor People's Campaign and organizing low-wage workers and so forth. I don't know how it's going. I know he's making a strong effort, but the Welfare Rights Organization, they did it. They were there for many, many, many years, advocating. So I just wanted to uplift your father. And then there's so many other contributions. I mean, goodness gracious, he was a leading figure with Mayor Dinkins. Before that, I think it was something called a youth project that he worked on, helped to found the Center for Third World Organizing. So you come out of some very, very great roots when you're talking about one and only Hobart James. So let me just say that the legacy, the story of my engagement in reparations is a very interesting one. An interesting one because I think for many years we were those of us who really began to advocate. One of our greatest challenges was to get Black people of African descent, our own folks who believed that it could be done, or that it was really possible, or even to know what reparations was and is. And quite tragic, but I was one of those persons. And I am honored, really, to have been rescued by Queen Mother Audley Moore, literally. Queen Mother Moore said that she was a brain surgeon. Her job was to operate on constipated minds, and mine was one of them. He was coming out of Youngstown, Ohio, an activist in NAACP, where I cut my teeth in terms of the Black freedom struggle. Of course, that was an integrationist organization, though I was very much aligned with the more militant wing of it. But nonetheless, I knew I had never ever heard of reparations. I went off I graduated from Youngstown State University, went off to Albany, New York, to a place which was then called the Graduate School of Public Affairs. And I went off there to get my graduate degree. Really wanted to go to University of Chicago, but didn't have the resources to get there. So I landed in Albany, New York. And while in Albany, New York, I had to put together a master's thesis. And this is, you're talking now, at the beginning of the explosion of Black power. Because again, this is the era of the 60s. And I think it was about 67, 68 or so that I went off to Albany, New York. And it was a quite interesting experience because Black power was not what the NAACP was about. and so one of my professors asked me about it, and I said, "Well, I don't know about this Black power stuff. I mean, He said, "Have you studied it? Do you know anything about Black power?" And actually, it was interesting because I've always been a proponent of critical thinking. Fact of the matter is, I really didn't know much about it, except it sounded like we were supposed to be against it because it was like Black power, anti-integration, and that kind of stuff. And so as a result of that, he shocked me. And it was interesting. I have to confess, this was a white professor. His name was Gunnell, John Gunnell. He challenged me, as I often challenge my students, think critically, examine things. And so as a result of that, I created my master's thesis was entitled Black Power, a Ideology on Anvil. And what I meant by that was here was an ideology that was being formed and shaped. And I decided to do original research, firsthand research on the topic. And what that meant was I was going to go out into the field and meet the people who were advocating for Black power, who were the architects of it. And I would record them and hear what they were talking about, and then try to get an understanding firsthand. And that was a great decision on my part. So in undertaking that pursuit, I met a whole bunch of people, Robert Fully Love, and I can't even remember all the names now. These are people from SNCC, Ivanhoe Donaldson, and so forth. And I recorded their stories and what they told me about Black power, what Black power was about. And I came to understand it, and I became a convert. Actually, I was being converted even as I was doing the study. Well, one of the people I had the opportunity to meet, and I don't even remember the moment or when or how it came to be, was Queen Mother Moore. And when you met Queen Mother Moore, that was always an interesting encounter, because she was going to come at you in a very positive way. Like, who are you? And what are you? How do you call yourself? And she was challenging the whole notion that we were not Negroes and all that kind of stuff. So it was shaking us up, right? So in that process, I came to develop a really strong relationship with Queen Mother Moore. In fact, she adopted me as a mentee. There was another brother out of Philadelphia, whose name I was thinking about. It'll come to me in a minute. Brilliant brother that she adopted, who was self-taught, very, very brilliant. And she also, that was like her first love. But she adopted me. And so, I was driving her back and forth. This was in the time when Adam Clayton Powell had been ejected from Congress, and people were campaigning to have him reelected and have him re-enter Congress, if you will. And I remember driving her back and forth to Washington, D.C., and it was actually driving her to Harlem on one instance that she went in to meet with A. Philip Randolph. I asked, who I had seen at the March on Washington. So I asked, that was my chance encounter to meet this great man, A. Philip Randolph. But the bottom line is, in that interchange with Queen Mother Moore, as I listened to her and as I learned from her, she was my mentor. She adopted me, and then I became converted and an advocate for reparations. And in that regard, I remember the 1972 Gary National Black Political Convention. When you go back and you see the film, It's Nation Time, you see Queen Mother Moore, out there in the lobby. Come and get your reparations. Where are your reparations? Queen Mother Moore was one of these one-person organizing phenomena. I mean, she would go anywhere, anytime, with money, without money. I mean, she just bust up in there, and people just loved her, respected her. She was audacious, and people would embrace her, and she would be coming at you, but she was coming at you in a way that challenged you and whatnot. So on the question of our identity, we're not Negroes. We're not only are we not Black people, we are African people. That was one of the drills. And she also then had us understand that we were entitled to reparations. What were reparations and why and whatnot. And so it was in that context that I then became, strongly involved. And let me just say that, so much so that, when I taught at several universities, the two most important for me were Cornell University with Dr. James Turner, my dear beloved friend. But I was one of the founders of the Department of Pan-African Studies at Kent State University. Actually, I was at Kent State University the day that those students were actually killed. At that point, it was the Institute for African American Affairs. It was being shaped into eventually a full department under Dr. Edward Crosby. And so much so was Queen Mother Moore respected that as we built out the department and went up to our second level, we named the entire second level of the Department of Pan-African Studies at Kent State University after Queen Mother Audley Moore. We brought her in and dedicated it and whatnot. So that's how I began and got involved. And from there, I was a lifetime member. I became a lifetime member of NCOBRA. I was not a founder, but I was attracted to NCOBRA naturally because NCOBRA was the organization and as a coalition. And when I went to the Center for Constitutional Rights, for example, I plugged CCR into all of the Black spaces in a way that it had never been plugged into these Black spaces. So I would look forward to going to the NCOBRA convention every year, wherever the city was, whatnot. I would be there among many to bathe in not only the Blackness of the matter, but also the strategy, the tactics, and moving forward in terms of how we would push reparations forward. Playthell Benjamin is the brother. People can Google him. He's a brilliant brother out of Philadelphia that Queen Mother Moore also adopted. She loved Playthell. He was an extraordinary intellect. Eventually he came and did some work actually at WBAI, where I have a radio show as well. But anyway, I just wanted to mention him because she always, had such great respect for Playthell Benjamin.
I was thinking when I was preparing for this show, you have such a rich history. I read an article, about your 70th birthday. That was 10 years ago. And then just also knowing your track record, even just in the reparation movement, I was like, well, we could probably just talk about NARC just for a whole episode. We could probably just talk about, New York State Reparations Commission. That's a whole, and but we got an hour, so we're gonna try to see if we can touch on as many of these as we can. And I know it's going to be rich. I know you have some great, stories to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, but let me just say another thing about the history, though, just to sort of wrap up that, not to wrap it up, but in terms of the history, the other notable piece that I enjoyed doing was, for various reasons, I always had a great relationship with progressive members of the Congressional Black Caucus. In fact, with members in general, and among those was Congressman John Conyers, because in 1976, actually, in the National Black Political Assembly, which came out of Gary, we advocated something called the 76 strategy. Because John Conyers was one of the most progressive congresspersons of all time. I mean, he was a lawyer. He was brilliant. He was bright. He was capable. He was a genius, really, because he was a jazz man. You looked at him, you kind of like took him for granted. But he, as you well know, he loved jazz, man. He was into jazz big time. In fact, when you went to the Congressional Black Caucus back in the day, on Thursday evening, you did not miss the jazz concert, the jazz piece that Conyers put on. So in 1976, we advocated for 5 people to run for president as independents, is what we were attempting to pull off. It was Dick Gregory, Hatcher, Julian Bond, the Honorable Ronald V. Dellums, and the Honorable John Conyers Jr. There were those 5 people. And they all eventually declined for whatever reasons. But I built this strong relationship with John Conyers. And so Conyers, and he was aware I was from Youngstown and whatever and all of that. But for at least, I would say 20 years almost, or thereabout, Conyers would invite me to be the convener of the reparations session, HR 40. And he would entrust me, to organize it and put it together and whatnot. And they were, that was a big deal at the Congressional Black Caucus. And I have to say parenthetically as well, that was great. But I also, as in Cobra involved, I remember particularly the tenure of Janita Obedelli. And I guess so because we thought a lot alike, because she was, bright, brilliant, suave, debonair, but she was always smooth and trying to also broaden the base, bring in some new people and so forth. Kind of took the edge off, because we activists sometimes we can be a little rough sometimes. We can be a little sharp. People say, why would I want to? Because we just walking around. And she just brought that personality to it. And of course, married to Brother Obedelli, Mario Obedelli. So she was revolutionary and all that. Right. So anyway, that was the other thing that I really, really take great pride in, that and it really positioned me really to meet and greet and to know many, many people who are doing reparations everywhere. So I just wanted to add that piece to it, because, that was something I always look forward to, being there. And it continued on with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, in terms of being the person who kind of convened HR 40. They called it, sometimes it was a forum, sometimes it was but something else, brain trust. I never understood the difference between them. But anyway, we would be in there talking about reparations in the middle of the CBC.
Yes. And that actually brings back a fond memory. One of the things that was always on my bucket list as a reparations activist was to speak at one of those CBC reparations brain trusts, and I was able to speak at one. And at that same year that I spoke was the same year that you did the honoring of my father from IBW. So it was like a twofer. I was able to speak on as a Cobra representative on the panel at the Congressional Black Caucus, as well as be a part of the ceremony and have all of these elected officials and so many people to come to the program IBW organized to honor my father in DC at the same time. But we have brother thought leader, Brother Kamm Howard, that has joined us. And I know that he considers you also as like a mentor to him in this reparations movement. So I just thought it would be good. And he's one of our sponsors of the show. It was one that really motivated me I had done it for a while, and then it fell off, and to get it back up and running again. So I said, well, I want to bring Kamm in to also have a word, involve him in this discussion with you, Dr. Daniels. And one thing I was thinking about was around the whole international piece. I was thinking, like I said, you involved in the international level, the national level, the state level, the local level. reparations movements. And but maybe I was thinking maybe we could start with the international. I know you and Kamm are a part of a group called the Global Circle for Reparations and Healing. And I'll let you maybe say a few words, Kamm, first to kind of kick it off. You're muted, brother.
No, I say you're doing a great job, Jumoke. And I was like, hey, Dr. Daniels, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I was telling Jumoke after he introduced me, man, I got an agent, man. I go out here and I can take on the world now.
That's great. Yeah, so, Dr. Daniels, before we go off into the international piece, I'd like for you to just talk about, how we got to NARC, what inspired you to do the Revitalizing the Reparations event that was like the prelude to the start of NARC, and how that really catapulted the movement a little bit, put a lot of energy that was not in the movement at that particular time. Can you just talk about that? Because that was very significant.
Yeah, and one of the things I also pride myself on is because I would often have sidebars with Brother Jumoke. A lot of times, we would have sidebars. We were talking about, well, what are we going to do and how are we going to do and whatnot. And sometimes we had disagreements, about various ways to move and whatever. And I've always tried to be as patient as I could and whatnot. Because I think that one of the keys is always figuring out, in fact, it's interesting as we're doing this now. I remember at one of the CBCs, I laid out the idea. I said, what we really, really need to do is see reparations as almost like you do a political campaign. If we had the resources to campaign for reparations, to build out an infrastructure and all of those kind of things. So as we, and I consider myself, in the spirit of Hober James, I see myself as an organizer and a facilitator. Those are my kind of my hallmarks. And I'm always looking for opportunities to see how we move the movement forward. And building IBW in particular, I push forward this notion of collaboration, the importance of collaborations, of working together, and operationalizing the concept of operational unity, actually. And so having a reputation for doing that has been helpful because, I also, as I talked about Sister Janeda Obadeli, I've always been able to reach from the Pan-Africanists and the nationalists to the civil rights organizations. I've had that ability to pull people together across that spectrum. So when we met, as we were meeting around HR 40, to be honest about it, it was beginning to be kind of sad, because the movement was in a lull. And by the way, that doesn't mean it was dead. It just means that we've had these ebbs and flows. Again, I just came out of St. Kitts, where Randall Robinson decided that he would, spend his days, as he retired and whatever, semi-retired. And of course, we know that his book, The Debt, was one of those markers. We know that our brother Senator Bill Owens in Massachusetts. I mean, there have been these periods in which it surged. Well, we were in a lull, in around 2013, 14, 15, and it was kind of going. It was a lull. Part of it was because we had the Black president. People kind of felt that, he was not in favor of it, and then frankly, Cobra had lost some of its key leadership. Some of it tragically with some of the people who had passed on. But then all of a sudden came this opportunity with CARICOM making this audacious decision to actually challenge the former colonial powers to pay up, for reparations for Native genocide and African enslavement across the board, including some of the more conservative, all 15 of them. And so I saw that as, this is an opportunity. If we can latch on to this, this is an opportunity to provide a jolt. And coincidentally, at that same time, we discovered it had been there, I guess, for a while, but a speech by Martin Luther King in which he talked about we're going to Washington, D.C. to get our check. And he really outlined he made the case in the same way that white labor, Black wealth our brother Claude Anderson had done it, but this was King speaking. So when we met this time with at the Congressional Black Caucus, and I will never forget Mama Joanne Watson, reached out to me and said, look, they're talking about not even having the brain trust this year. I said, well, it has been rough going. I said, but we still should do it in any event. I said, but this year there's a particular reason to do it. And I said, we should turn it into a strategy session. And that's what we did. And Kwesi Taifa was there, Mama Joanne was there, Dr. Julianne Malvo. It was a relatively small group. Cam, I don't know if you were there or not, but it was a relatively small group. And at that session, we made a decision that we were going to try to bring the leadership of CARICOM with this dynamic new movement into the U.S., and we were going to try to have a series of forums all across the country. Well, quite frankly, we didn't have the capacity to do a series, but what we did begin to look at was several cities, and we decided that the place to do the first one was in Chicago. And Chicago, because there was, a strong chapter of NCOBRA, there was the inimitable, the one and only Dr. Conrad Worrell. I was talking about him today. People were talking about Harold Washington. I was trying to say they don't understand. Dr. Conrad Worrell was an impeccable organizer, brilliant strategist. He's the one who really, really, really put the troops behind Harold Washington and helped engineer his election. And then you had the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was in Chicago. You had Dr. Ivor Carruthers was there. You had a sympathetic university, Chicago State University. And so all of those things converged in a way that allowed us to have a revitalizing forum there at the University of Chicago State University. And, today people get many more views, but back then at that point, we got over 10,000 views all over the world. And, we had, people came and Lionel Jean-Baptiste were there and all that. Bottom line is we had hoped that actually Prime Minister Gonzalez would come. He was the one in CARICOM during his tenure who had pushed it. But the real brains, the real guru, the real thought leader par excellence behind it was, of course, Professor Hilary Beckles. So Beckles came up in there. And man, you were all there. Both of you were there, and all that, man. It was an incredible gathering. I don't know, 8,000 to 10,000 in play. I know not 1,000. It wasn't that many people there, but I mean, it wasn't, but it was at least 1,000 or so that was there and whatever. But thousands viewed it globally because now, we understood what the internet meant and all of that. Barbara Leonard Dunstan was there and all of that. So that was the beginning of this synergy, this back and forth that also flowed into the Congressional Black Caucus sessions. So all of a sudden you had Camilo Gonzalez at one of the sessions. Beckles decided to bust up a bit. Tallahassee Coach came to one of the sessions. I mean, all of a sudden we had sessions at the CBC that had 300, 400, 500 people at them. I mean, it just really took off. And we were just synergizing, which I was enjoying. I was enjoying watch all this whole thing play out. One of the key challenges, however, was, the Institute of the Black World 21st Century, which is my legacy organization. We were doing it on guts and faith, a lot of free energy, free labor. People were contributing their time. When we didn't have much of a budget, we had very little resources. Actually, some, but very little. So the question was, who could actually then, if we wanted to create a companion or a parallel organization like CARICOM, because what CARICOM did was they created a CARICOM Reparations Commission, and they developed a 10-point program. All of that looked very, very good in terms of what could potentially happen in this country. And I will never forget it because we've had to review this over and over again. I finally, because I said in Chicago, I said, we don't have the ability, we don't have the resources to do this, But at the end of the day, in surveying it, it seemed that, convening and having the ability to pull together people is something that you have to have some credibility for. We thought we had that, and I think we were correct in saying so. So I went to the board and I asked them to make this move, that we would move forward to convene and create a National African American Reparations Commission, that we would convene an international conference. We ain't had no money. literally. But we put all of our chips in the middle of the table. We said we're gonna go to the people, and y'all were there. You saw how it worked out. I ain't ashamed to say it cost $45,000 to do this. Because people, you said if you get here, we'll pay for your line. And now we had to just do all the make lemonade out of lemon stuff that you do. It cost $45,000. We raised $42,000 between the different events that we had. And then we went and got the rest later on. But that was an incredible event. That was one of them. These things happen for a reason at a certain point in time. So we were at the right place, the right call, at the right time. People came from over 22 nations from all over the world. Because of the internet, again, people were able to see it and envision it and so forth. And from that point, we created NARC and built it out. And the rest is history. And it's a challenging history. It's a good history. But I am really delighted that Englewood was a part of the foundation of that. And you can remember the early conversations we were having with you and Kamm about, can we do this? And they kind of make people understand, no, we're not trying to, IBW is not trying to take over the reparations movement. And, we're just trying to facilitate. We're just trying to move things forward. And, and these were challenging discussions. And I'm glad I was able to have the patience and hopefully the credibility to have conversations with you. I remember Kamm, and you may not remember, I flew to Chicago to meet with you head on, to talk to you about it. Because just to say, we need you, and to assure you what we were trying to do, and to let's work together and whatever and whatnot. So these are the kind of memories that I kind of cherish in terms of moving forward. But NARC was created in that way. And of course, we immediately moved to create a 10-point program. And I think the other, there are many, many incredible things that we've done. But I would say the second thing that we did was to look at the legislation. Because at the summit, frankly, there was skepticism about HR 40. People were saying, damn, when we've been doing HR 40 all this time. And by the way, HR 40 was a brilliant organizing tool, brilliant decision made by, the Nationalist Pan-Africanist movement and in Cobra, which is, you could, it's kind of hard sometimes to make that kind of pragmatic decision that, study, what the hell we going, it's just a study thing. We want the real deal. We don't want no study. Well, at that moment, it was important to educate people. And it proved to be an incredible educational tool, because organizations that had not been on board came on board. All of that worked out very well. But it never really had more than 50 or so sponsors, or maybe 75, but 50 probably at the most. And it was a study bill. But by the time we get to 2014, 2015, 2016, we say, wait a minute now, it really ain't really now. We have built a sufficient case. We already had the case, but it's been enhanced tremendously that we need to move that from a study bill to a remedy bill. And we were able to do that. And I'm delighted to say we also brought in the Movement for Black Lives. We had a critical meeting with them in Atlanta, included them in the process. And, and Dr. Carruthers and some others, and Kamm led a team with the inside of NARC to get it done. And then eventually, of course, it was Kamm who took the leadership and actually working directly, because Congressman Khan said, bet, let's roll, and working with Kenny Keenan, we were able to rewrite that legislation to say it is a bill to study and develop reparations proposals, which is a qualitative difference. So that's another signature moment. And then, then Evanston came along, so NARC has had these signature moments, that we've worked on. And so again, as an organizer, I also think I can look self-critically on the work that we get done. And, and I take great pleasure and great pride in having been able to contribute, some of the strategies, some of the tactics, some of the things that are necessary, and, not easy, not hard, and Kamm and I, we've had our debates and discussions sometimes on, because, and I understand it, because Kamm is, and that's good. I like that creative constructive tension, particularly between allies who trust each other, because King and Kwame Ture had it out, but they did that lovingly. They would be debating and all that strategy and tactics. And sometimes, Kwame Ture said, love you, Dr. King, I'm rolling this way. And he said, yeah, and then I'm rolling this way. but we were able to figure out how to best move and approach. We built this incredible umbrella for HR 40, the HR 40 strategy group. Who would have thought? The ACLU jumping to this thing, Center for American Progress, all these groups. So it has been just for me, it's been an incredible ride, and incredible, and of course we're in the middle of it. Now we're facing the challenge. We're facing questions we never thought we'd have to figure out. Now we're trying to figure out how to. It's exploding in such incredible ways. We're now trying to figure out how to best harness it, and I don't mean control it. I do mean, how do we guide it? How do we help it out? How do we provide so that people understand reparations, what reparations is and what it is not, and not just discourage people, encourage people, beat back some of the negative debates, but also did that in a constructive way. But Queen Mother Moore, as I said before, Queen Mother Moore and John Conyers and Reparations Ray Jenkins and Callie Hoffman, they dancing. They said, hey, this is we are fulfilling their work, if you will, and so it's a good place to be in terms of history.
I say.
I think it's important, to lift up that, it's one thing to observe, as an activist or organizer, to observe something that's a challenge, like you observed that the reparations movement was at a lull, but then to take the next step and to do something about it by calling the revitalization of the reparations movement in Chicago, which was definitely a pivotal point in the reparations movement. Like you said, I was there, Kamm was there, Kamm spoke. And to hear Sir Hilary Beckles, oh my, he was so amazing, and Minister Farrakhan on the same platform together.
Dr. Jeremiah Wright, you can't leave out Dr. Jeremiah Wright.
Yeah, man.
Jeremiah Wright, yes, and
Mama Joanne was there.
Mama Joanne, Ivor Carruthers. It was
John Conyers as well.
And so it was very historical. It definitely was a historical point in the reparations movement. And then, like you said, then the transition from that to the next year having the International Conference on Reparations, also another historical point. And Jesse Jackson, so many other people were there that made some very, powerful contributions to that. And not so much just I don't want us to get focused on individuals so much, but also just the fact that it represented, like you said, a resurgence in the energy of people getting behind reparations and supporting reparations and wanting to re-engage in the reparations movement. So we thank you for that leadership.
It's interesting. There was a debate, by the way, about using that term "revitalize." By the way, there was one of our best thinkers said we don't want them. We ain't using that word. We ain't revitalizing. And but we were trying to say the reparations movement is dead. It's not. It's never been. And it never will be, frankly. But there are these moments of the surge, and then you ride every wave has actually taken us further. Every wave, and then now it is just it's just like a tsunami now. There's no turning back. We're seeing things. It's just like I never honestly thought I would see a Black president. I never really thought that would happen, but it did. And I never really. If you had told me we would be Chicago, that we'd have a New York commission. You'd have a California commission. We got a New York commission. We got Illinois. Not sufficient. Yeah, Illinois, it's not sufficient. But you got the Anglican Church and all these people stepping up and nations stepping up. I would not have. There's a lot of work to be done. But I'm saying I would not have believed that. We're in a great place in terms of the accumulative Black freedom struggle and the struggle for reparation, reparatory justice, which is at the end of the day, this is something, that is going to be cleansing in a way that many people who even support it may not be aware, and some of the people who are sort of just signing on, because at the end of the day, we got to deal with all of the like you talk about non-repetition. Well, non-repetition can only occur if you create a system that does not repeat itself in terms of the values. And that's that's not a small deal. That's a tall
order. That's a tall order. It certainly is. I know you mentioned earlier and just hit on it. So let's unpack that a little bit about, one of the things that's caused the resurgence of reparations movement is the local reparations initiatives, right? Being kicked off by Evanston, also Asheville and other places as well, Chicago. So, you've been have made a contribution in terms of that, supporting the Evanston initiative and others. Why don't you, let's unpack that a little bit, because that has definitely created a big surge in the reparation movement.
Right. I mean, it's one of our most important pieces of work strategically, Ashley. And again, I'll never forget it because I was convening, facilitating the session. Kamm was there and others were there for HR 40 with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And I had gotten a call from Lionel Jean-Baptiste. He said, look out for this sister from Evanston. Robin Ruth Simmons, she's introducing this bill and she's out there. She wants somebody, she needs some support. She needs help. And I've told her, he said, to come, and I told her to meet you and NARC. And when you get there, then to meet with y'all. And so it was interesting how it developed, because the schedule had two different sessions. There was a session, I guess, on maybe the truth and transformation piece or something rather than it was us. And so Robin actually missed the actual session, but she eventually found us. And man, I'll never forget that conversation, because she came in and she was so eager and so energetic and so ready to go. And she said, we sat down and pulled up a table and had a conversation. And I remember the conversation clearly. I said, well, this is great. We should do this. I said, are there any resources? And she said, no. I said, well, I don't know how we're going to do this. We don't have a budget, which we didn't at that point at all. She said, but we have to do this. We have to do this. I said, okay, we'll do it. We'll figure out a way to do it. And we did. And I said, okay, let's figure out how to do it. So I said, well, wait a minute. We have commissioners who are right there in the area. Dr. Auburn Gresham, Kamm Howard are right there in the area. Lionel Jean-Baptiste is right there in the area. We add Sister Nkechi Taifa to the mix because of just her historical role, her ability to galvanize people and energize people. And then I'll join in. And I said, we'll figure out how to finance our way and put enough resources together to come and do a visitation. And thank God we've always had a great relationship with Danny Glover. And so we said, we'll add Danny Glover to see whether he can come in and do a town hall meeting. And that was just, another one of those strokes, man. I mean, brothers and sisters, I mean, it was just, and we were able to go in and hold our heads up as an authoritative body and to give support to Robin and to do meet. We went in with our heads up, you know what I mean? We went in as authorities to meet with members of city council, the mayor, different stakeholders. And then we had this big meeting, I don't know, maybe 60 people at a community center with stakeholders. They was representatives, people from the financial industry, people who were grassroots leaders, people who were professionals. And we had a great meeting with them, building out that support. And then, as a result of that, we were able to have unfortunately COVID hit, but still we were able to work. Judge Lionel was on the ground to do some heavy lifting and whatever. But the bottom line is, out of that process, we were able to, with our assessment team, we were able to do a preliminary assessment, made recommendations out of that assessment, and then we did a final assessment in which we were able to certify Evanston as a model, as a replicable model, flexible, replicable model, for reparations all around the country. And then we made the recommendation that we have a resource center, that we have a place strategically where reparations advocates at the state and local level, mostly at the state local level at that point, could come. A symposium, the first symposium, and then to learn, and we call learn and share and whatever. And boom, I mean, it happened. And of course, the tireless leadership of Robin and Ruth Simmons, a visionary, courageous sister, who herself, admittedly, she was learning and whatnot, but she's such a bright person. She's such a studious person, and we've been able to work with her and to move this forward. And so that's another we're still building it out. It's still growing, but it's so important to have that resource center. And we were there for the unveiling of the mural and all of that. And in a minute, they're gonna be building up because it is going to grow. But that means we have a place where people can come, and it also means that we can kind of systematize the toolkit. We can kind of have a way in which there's a network, there's a resource center of people who are on the same page. They all support HR 40. They all support, generally in a broad sense, comprehensive sense of reparations. There are flexible ways of doing this, but people are not dashing off, meaning well to say equity is reparations, or dashing off to say that only lineage is right. You've got a space now to help, and hopefully she's young enough, she can continue, but she got such great energy, but we don't want to wear her out. I keep saying, we need her, to do strategically intervene in places and then have a structure there. And that's where we are with that. And that is another incredible engagement. And of course, Kamm, again, played an incredible role. I think it was really providential that he was right next door, and right in the suburbs, could go and be with her. And because these are tough battles, man. This sister was taking heat. I mean, taking them blows. And I really wonder if, Kamm, you had not been there, to be that support. And you see it in the big playback. You can see, that's somebody there to help her in a positive and constructive way to go through those battles. Because, very often it's your own folks. That's why whenever I go to Evans, I always let people in Evanston know that they are making history, because you could be making history and not even being aware of what it is that you're doing. And that is because sometimes people want to personalize it as opposed to seeing it in the broader context, right? And so we're teaching and educating people to understand that we're changing the world, and that change is taking place right where you are. And it's like Kwame Ture said about in Black Power, there are the divisible and indivisible resources. The divisible resources is what do I get? Indivisible resources is what do we get? It's what does our community get? So the community of Evanston is benefiting. Even if I don't get a grant myself, it's that's sort of beside the point at one level. There's an indivisible, or what we would say collective, benefit that is taking place in terms of what the contribution is. And that's where Evanston is. And we got to continue to teach that, to break through the skepticism, to break through and in some ways, this skepticism is a different kind of skepticism, because it's a skepticism saying it needs to be bigger, it needs to have more. I want to check. That's better than saying, oh man, we ain't ever gonna get no reparation, man. I don't know what them Negroes talking about. See, we're in a different place now. We're now struggling over how to do it and how to get it done in a way that is good. So it's exciting. It's really, really great.
So we have just a few minutes left. We got to get them back. We got to get them back, Jumoke, for maybe 2 or 3 more sessions.
Yeah, I was thinking about we'll have to do a part 2. We can do that.
Right, exactly. I would like, Dr. Daines, if you could, briefly, because I know Jumoke has another question, but if you can just talk about where we at now with the loss of our leader, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and where are we at on the federal level because of that loss, and what are some of the things that we may need to do? That's a whole lot, but if you can just briefly touch on that.
That's the critical question. That's the critical question. That's the one that we are strategizing about, using whatever strategy and tactics that we can. Sister Nkechi Chaifa has called for a Reparations Now march and rally next year. I think that's an excellent move, because I think what we have needed is a massive display of support in that form. We've got people signed on as co-sponsors, unprecedented in COBRA, and Reparations United certainly played the leading role in that. No question, the Center for American Progress, Human Rights Watch, with the Why We Can't Wait campaign, which was innovated by the HR 40 strategy group and whatever, but they took it to a whole new level in terms of getting hundreds of organizations on board. So we're in a critical place where we've got to push this across the finish line. I'm confident we will. We'll see whether we can get it done before I hate to say it was kind of the lame duck period. I mean, after the presidential election is over, Kamala Harris is going to win. There's going to be a giant rainbow wave, there. And I'm glad I had the analysis. I put it out there, and people were all up on, like they were hitting me hard. But I told them I'm cool, Mo D, reinvigorated. How you like me now? Because I had it out, nailed it down. So I think we'll make it. And if we don't make it I hate to say if we don't, but I'm confident that between Biden deciding that he can have an Emancipation Proclamation moment and doing it on the way out, if not, I feel much better about the mobilizing and organizing co-sponsors and so forth in the next session under Kamala Harris, knowing we can't, unless there's some really great wave, we're not going to get it through the Senate. The only route is an executive order, but I think we're on good grounds to get it done. And I really think that Kamm did an excellent job, innovating, creating the whole notion of earn the black vote and all of the work around that with influences and so forth. I know we ain't finished. We got another step or two we're trying to take in order to push it further. So I'm very confident. I'm very optimistic about that. And, again, if we come back, we also, there's a lot of global stuff happening with the global circle and, the work that's happening with the AU, the work that's happening in Colombia. They may well be moving to put forth a governmental sponsored equity commission that's really about reparations. So there's a lot more work to be done. And there's some other stuff we're working on. We don't necessarily want to talk about now, but we're working on another major piece of this action that will be another strategic move that will help move the reparations movement forward. So I talk too long and talk too much, but y'all know I got to go cut the grass next and all that. I said, well, I told my wife, I said, I got to do this podcast. I said, but then I can go out there and do some housework. But y'all know I'm available.
But yeah, that's exactly why we want to have these conversations with the elders, because the elders are able to give us these rich stories and to give us the history and to put things in context for many of us who are just coming into this movement at different levels. And even myself coming in 1996, I feel like a veteran, but you got me beat by 20 years. So,
I was gonna say you've been out there consistently. And by the way, and that's what it takes. I always say to folks, it takes.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Got to be consistent.
And my cousin is in the chat now. I'm going to say I'm going to say her question. I know for me it's a longer answer, but she has a question. And it's actually the cousin that you met you at your family reunion. She asked, what is each of our visions of what reparations could look like here and for the Caribbean?
Well, that's pretty easy at one level for the Caribbean, because they made a decision that reparations will be developmental. They're not debating individual payments. And put it in a very plain language, Professor Hilary Beckles has said, we want to clean up the mess. We want the colonial powers to clean up the mess that they created. So they want to be able to enhance the systems that are in place, whether it's healthcare, education, economic development. There's in their 10-point program. And by the way, their program, if I recall correctly, and certainly NARC's 10-point program also creates the basis for repatriation as well. And I think that's important, because it's repatriation with resources. You're just not going somewhere, you're going something with something in hand. So CARICOM is having some success. I mean, again, they took the legal route, but they're having some success because there's a moral imperative. Like King said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards freedom. But you have to bend it. It doesn't bend automatically, and we've been bending it. And CARICOM is playing a leading role. And and we collectively with Reparations United and NARC and working with the Global Circle and so forth. I mean, we challenged. I had a conversation just the other day with some folks around this. We challenged the African leaders to step up, because the African leaders were kind of, they were not in the forefront, but now they are stepping up. And President Adu from Ghana, has stepped up big time. And he will be stepping down as president, but whatever his domestic politics may have been or not, I mean, he has done a hell of a job in relationship to projecting and challenging heads of state to take on reparations, but also to challenge the financial systems out there. As the Prime Minister Mia Mottley from Barbados and the Prime Minister from Antigua. These people, I mean, they're being audacious, man. They're being bold saying you got to clean this mess up. So that's what reparations is going to look like and will look like in the Caribbean. And the United States, it'll I think will eventually be similar. I mean, we have defended the right for people to have individual payments and whatnot, but we've also largely, if you look at the 10-point programs, the emphasis is on systemic collective community benefits that help build out systems where it'll be we benefiting as opposed to just me benefiting and whatnot. And it's going to move. It'll be a bigger struggle in this country than maybe it is in some other places. But the momentum is definitely building. So even when we get the HR 40 commission, and we were talking about this the other day, who's going to be on the inside, who's going to be on the outside, because you're going to need the outside still. We won't be able to just rest and say, okay, then no, we're going to have to organize all across this country to put major pressure on to make sure that there's not only a plan, a covenant, if you will, but that it will be financed, even if it takes 30 years to finance it or 50 years to finance it, that it will be financed. Oh, Lord.
So, I think we continue. I think we have could I have time for another question? Or no?
Yeah, well, I thought we would just kind of let Dr. Daniels kind of give his closing remarks at this point.
Sounds good.
And I know that I do want to have a conversation with you and at another point, to really talk about the New York state reparations, piece. And I know you're a commissioner on the New York State Reparations Commission. And we know Charles Barron has been fighting for that for a long time. At one point it had INCOPRA and IBW and D12 movements specifically written into the bill. And I know that's changed and stuff over time, but I know we can make that maybe just a topic of a specific conversation around, New York.
Yeah, those state reparations are very important. They're moving along, and New York will be an important part of that equation. And, and then, like you said, the international piece is a whole nother conversation. I started a piece on the Vatican. We need to talk about that. So, I'm ready. I'm ready for the sequel.
Okay, that's right. So what would you like to give us as our closing charge? Where do you see the reparations movement going? What do we need to be focusing on right now as we close out?
Well, no, I just think that at this stage, we need, I'll use the words of Reverend Jesse Jackson, keep hope alive. We've sparked the interest. It's on fire. Or better yet, I use the words of reparations and Kichi Taifa, because I think she captured this as she often does. Reparations is on fire, and we need to keep the flames burning, and in the sense that it's cleansing. Fire is cleansing. It can be destructive, but it also is cleansing. And certainly when you look at white supremacy and the systems of racism and repression, they need to be cleansed. And that's what reparations is going to do. So I'm optimistic, and we just, it's a lucha continua. It's an old phrase, but I keep using it because it is about constant, relentless, creative struggle in order to move things forward. So I'm just still ready for the revolution.
All right, we appreciate you. Long distance marathon runner in the revolution so far. You continue to be. So what say you, Brother Kamm, as we bring it to a close?
Man, it's a lot of work ahead, as Dr. Daniels was stating, and I'm excited. I've been excited for the last 10 years straight to be in the movement, because we're making so much progress. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we're doing it. We're winning. So leave it there. And NARC has some major moves that they'll be making, and we're going to bring Dr. Daniels back on to talk about those major moves that are coming up. So,
all right, very good. So I just, as we close out, just want to thank both of you for your contributions, for your leadership in this reparations movement. I consider myself understudying under both of you all, and continuing to do the work that we do to move this forward. It's really important that people understand that this is a long-term fight. And even whatever gains that we do get in the immediate, we're going to have to continue to fight to protect those. We have to continue to fight to advance those. So You know, we just encourage you to get in this fight with us. We need people to step up their engagement in the fight. And we are just so thankful for these two brothers who are on the show, who have been doing the work and showing by their commitment and by their leadership how important this work is to our people. So you've been listening to Reparations Now podcast. My name again is Brother Jumoke Ifetayo. Our special guest has been Professor Dr. Ryan Daniels, giant in the reparations movement, our thought leader, Brother Kamm Howard, who supports the show and make the show possible. We give thanks for both of them on the show. As we close out, we say reparations now, reparations now, reparations now.